Hey, I'm Jordan Imiola, and welcome to the first episode of Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting. If you don't know who I am, then you'll find out. I don't like when podcast episodes talk too much fluff at the beginning of their shows, and I like to do things different. So let's just get to the nitty gritty. For the first episode of this podcast, I was trying to figure out what I want to do, and then I thought about, well, what's the purpose of writing a screenplay? It's to sell it and get it produced, right? And I think selling is one of the biggest hurdles a screenwriter can have. I've written over 40 movies, and selling is its own hustle. So I wanted to go over my journey of how I sold my first screenplay for this first episode. So let's get into it.
Screenwriters talk. Screenwriting. Screenwriters talk. Screenwriting. Screenwriters talk. Screenwriting.
So this story begins about 2012. I was in LA for about 2.5 years, and I just finished a script called Man, I Feel Like a Woman. And it was about two female stand-up comedians, think Amy Poehler and Tina Fey. They cross-dress as guys to prove women can be just as funny as men, but soon their alter egos become more famous than they are. So it was kind of Tootsie meets Bridesmaids. I started marketing it and sending it to producers and production companies by sending out a query letter. And I'll do a future episode about what makes a successful query letter / query email that will get producers to want to read your script. And at the time, Bridesmaids was still a big deal, and I got over 100 people to request the script. I think I had over 10 meetings from that. This one guy I met, he was a director and producer, independent director and producer. I met up with him, and he told me that he liked my voice, he liked my writing, but this script was not for him. He laughed a lot at the jokes and thought it was really funny, but he wanted to know what else I have. The lesson you can take from this is always have more. When you go into a meeting, always have more. And I pitched him all the scripts that I wrote beforehand. And he kindly just said no to all of them. None of them were really for him. And then I said, well, I'm working on this other script. And he's like, well, tell me about that. And my pitch was a feel-good comedy about a boy trying to kill himself. And he loved this idea. I had the first act done at the time, and I pitched him what I had. And pretty much it was about a boy named Ray. I think he was 21 years old, and he tried committing suicide, but every time he tried committing suicide, it would just backfire. So for example, he ordered the Anarchist Cookbook, which is a book on how to make bombs. He ordered that online, but when he got it delivered in the mail, he found out it was a cookbook for anarchists. So he found out how to make anti-establishment, anti-pasta, and just stuff like this. So anyways, he calls the suicide hotline to find out the best way to kill himself, and he meets a girl on the suicide hotline that won't tell him what he wants. But every time he calls, she answers the phone, and eventually they meet in real life, which I don't think you're supposed to do if you work for the suicide hotline. But they meet in real life. It took place in a small town, and she pretty much shows him how to be grateful and how to be happy. And he stops taking life for granted and learns how amazing life can be, how important community is, and how helping people can help you. And all this stuff, yada, yada, yada. But then you find out at the midpoint of the movie that she's dying. So the whole movie takes a turn, but in the end, he still is happy and grateful that he met her, and she dies in the end. Sorry, but the movie's already sold, so it's not like, it's not like you can buy it. Yeah, so anyways, I pitched him the story, and I pitched him what I had so far, and he loved it, and he said, when you finish the script, send it to me. So I finished the script, I want to say like 3 to 6 months later, and I sent it to him. I think I sent it to some other people as well, but he loved it. He called me up and asked me to meet him at a coffee shop. So we met at the coffee shop, and he told me he wanted to option it. He wanted to buy it. So I met with him a couple times. Really nice guy, paid for my coffee. And that's a big sign too. We'll talk about that hopefully later in the podcast. People buy you coffee. Producers buy you coffee, that's a really good sign. If they don't buy you coffee, maybe go with the person who does buy you coffee. Anyways, so he was super interested in the script, and I signed an agreement with him. I'm sure there's details I forgot, but this was over 10 years ago. So an option agreement, this is good to know too. And an option agreement is pretty much a producer or a production company, or a director in this case, will give you an agreement, and they will give you 10% of the money of the selling price. So whatever the selling price is, they give you 10% of that. So he gave me 10% of the selling price, which is, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it was good. It paid off all my debt, and it made me stay in LA a lot longer than I thought I was going to. So I signed the option agreement, and always make sure you get an attorney to look at it. So I actually called up Legal Shield. I'll probably talk about this later in the podcast too. But Legal Shield is a service. If you can't afford an attorney, it's like a subscription service. You pay, I think, $30, and they can review documents for you and call you on the phone and give you legal advice. They provide attorneys who will look over your contracts for you. They in no way sponsor this podcast. I just like helping people who can't afford a fancy schmancy attorney. So anyways, I sent the agreement to Legal Shield, and this contract was pretty good. I will definitely probably go later in this podcast about bad contracts that I've gotten that I have not signed because they were terrible. And if you want to know more about good contracts and bad contracts for scripts in greater detail, I highly recommend taking my on-demand course, Sell a Script, Make Money Screenwriting, which you can find on my website at www.jordanimiola.com. But this contract was pretty good. I think there was a couple things here and there my attorney told me about that I should probably change or look into, but it wasn't that many things. And usually, I think most contracts and agreements have that. There's a couple things your attorney might be like, I advise you to add this in, or I advise you to see if you can change this part or whatever. So I think we negotiated like once or twice, but it was very all on good terms. Just very small things. I think for the one that's popping into my head is the attorney told me to add something about merchandise, just in case the movie makes merchandise down the road. Probably wouldn't, but say they wanted to make a Funko Pop of the main characters. I want to get some money from the Funko Pops. That's just an example. So anyways, I signed the option agreement, and this was beginning of 2013, I believe. And the option was for a year and a half. So in that year and a half, he has the rights to get the cast and the crew, and I can't go anywhere else with the screenplay. And in the agreement, there was also a part that was for a second extension. So that means I got another paycheck after that year and a half, but he would able to option it a little bit longer. I think it was another year, maybe a year and a half. I can't quite remember. I'll say another year. So then I completely forgot about it. And this was maybe end of 2015 or early 2016. I kind of forgot about the option. And then one day, I wake up early. I was working a job in human resources. Woke up early. I went to a coffee shop to go write because I like to write in the morning before I went to my 9-to-5 day job. So I went to a coffee shop. I was writing in the morning for maybe an hour, and then I go back home to go take a shower and get ready for work. And it's about maybe 8 o'clock in the morning. And my building manager from my apartment building said, "Hey, someone dropped something off for you in the mail." And I was like, "It's 8 o'clock in the morning. Like, the mailman wouldn't be here this early. I don't know what this is." So I opened the mailbox. There's an envelope addressed to me. I open the envelope, and there is the best check I've ever seen. It was 5 digits, and the screenplay sold just before the option was about to end. So I got the other 80% of the money. Since the two options were 10%, I got the other 80% of the money. So that was amazing. So that's pretty much how I sold my first screenplay. Some takeaways from that are have other scripts or have other ideas when you go to a meeting. Have an attorney look at your option agreement or your contract, and things often happen when you forget about them. So that was the first time I sold a screenplay. It was like the best feeling in the world. I went to work. I should have taken the day off and just had fun, but instead I decided to go to work, and I just kind of told everyone I worked with, and I don't even think I worked that day really. I think I was just too happy that I was just going around telling my friends, "Hey, I sold a screenplay today." And the movie has not been produced yet. The guy still has the rights to it because it officially sold. But we'll see. Sometimes things happen when you least expect it. For example, I totally forgot about this script that I optioned, and then it sold. So things happen. Always have a little bit of hope. So that's how I first sold my first screenplay. That's the story of this first podcast episode. I know that it only took probably 10 minutes or less, but these podcast episodes, some of them are really short. Some of them will be a little bit longer. I just wanted to start this. I've been thinking about it for a while, and they say you don't need to be great to start, but you got to start to be great. So I just wanted to start this podcast episode. So now let's get into the fluff. What is this podcast called Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting? Well, I will find out as I make it. My idea kind of right now is a lot of podcasts that I listen to are just one person telling a story, like what I just did. And I kind of love those. They get to the nitty gritty. They're short usually, and I learn a lot. So some episodes will be that. Some episodes will be interviews. I'll probably do a lot of crossovers with my other podcast. If you haven't listened to that one yet, it's called the Deadline Junkies Screenwriting Podcast, which is part of my writing group, and I love doing that one. But it's a lot of scheduling with other people, especially publicists or managers of screenwriters that we interview. Where this podcast is more off the cuff and is geared more towards new screenwriters who are trying to learn the ropes. I teach screenwriting to many new screenwriters and have coaching clients that I meet every week over Zoom. and sometimes they have great questions that I want to answer in this podcast. I have clients everywhere from LA to Toronto. My most well-known client is Cheryl Chase, who does the voice of Angelica Pickles on Rugrats. I'm coaching her on how to write a web series that she'll star in next year. I'm bad at self-promoting, but I'm trying to get better. But if you're new to screenwriting and want someone who will teach you how to write a movie, TV show, or web series, I'd love to coach you. My website is www.jordanimiola.com. That's JORDANIMIOLA.com. I have my on-demand courses on there too, and I teach group courses from time to time over Zoom. So right now I'm in a group course where I'm teaching people how to write a horror screenplay because it's just about Halloween time when we recorded this. And I'm getting ready to teach a Christmas course because Christmas is just around the corner and Christmas scripts are evergreen and awesome. I've also written and produced and directed my own Christmas movie called Christmas Staycation. It came out in 2020. It's pretty much about the pandemic and how a family who can't be together on Christmas, they wait till last minute to tell their dad. But the middle child decides that she's going to get the whole family together on Zoom, and they do a virtual Christmas party, and it's super funny. I'm very proud of it. I got a bunch of my actor friends to act in it, and we made it within like 3 or 4 months, and it all takes place on Zoom, but it's super funny. It's probably the funniest online virtual movie there is, at least in my opinion. There's another film that was rebranded with that same name, but ours is the one that was all on Zoom. Again, Christmas Staycation, which is streaming on Tubi. So if you want to watch a funny Christmas film that's all done on Zoom, you can watch it on Tubi. It's also on DVD and being sold at Walmart and Best Buy and all that stuff. Website is xmasstaycation.com. So yeah, other than that, I've been writing nonstop for 17 years. Long story short, I wrote my first screenplay in the summer of 2007, kept writing. I went to school for TV and film arts at Buffalo State University. It's not a hoity-toity college by any means, but it's a fun place to go to school. I've been nominated for the WJ Michael Collier Fellowship when I was in college. And then 2009, I got an internship with 20th Century Fox. And then I went back to school for a semester. Then in January 2010, I moved out to LA 2 weeks after I graduated, worked for Fox, and I was in LA for 12 years and worked at various production companies and studios and just kept on writing. I've written over 40 movies. I've written over a dozen TV episodes, pilot specs. I've gotten some pilots produced. I've gotten a bunch of comedy series that are online produced. Check out my IMDb. It's a lot to talk about, and I'll probably forget things. But then the pandemic happened and everything kind of shifted because you could no longer see people in person. Hence why I made that movie Christmas Staycation. So then during the pandemic, my wife and I were kind of sick of living in Hollywood. We had a small studio apartment. We kind of got over LA. LA's full of traffic and we missed seasons. We missed community. We missed not being in traffic for half your life. So my wife and I decided to buy a house in Buffalo. Go Bills. And I've been back in Buffalo for the past 2.5 years. Still writing nonstop. Now I'm producing more things in Buffalo. There's an up-and-coming film industry here, and movies like A Quiet Place 1 and 2 were filmed here. Nightmare Alley was also filmed here, and there's a ton of excellent actors and producers here. I'm sure there's great actors and producers in your city as well. You just got to go out and find them. And I'll have a future episode about how to find great actors, producers, and directors in your city if you want to produce your own content. Because I think it's important to know that since 2022, more people are leaving California than moving into California. Since the pandemic, if you're outside of LA and you're writing, you have a lot better chance of getting things sold and produced. You no longer really have to be in LA if you're a screenwriter. I think before the pandemic, everyone was like, yes, you got to be in LA. But after the pandemic, no, you don't. Everything's on Zoom now. People are accustomed to being on Zoom. I'm on Zoom all the time. I teach all my clients pretty much on Zoom. I have a couple clients in Buffalo who I teach in person. When producers request my scripts or want to talk to me about my scripts, they usually want to meet on Zoom now. And they don't even know that I'm no longer in LA. Everything's on Zoom right now. So you do not have to be in LA to be a screenwriter. I'll probably make another whole episode about that and my thoughts on that. But yeah, I've been a screenwriter nonstop, and that's pretty much it. I don't want to make this podcast episode too long. Like the Sabrina Carpenter record, I want to make this short and sweet. That reference will probably be outdated by next year. So that's pretty much it. That's how I sold my first screenplay. I hope that was beneficial in some way. And if you like this podcast, review and what do they say? Review and like it and rate it and do all that stuff that, people always say at the end of their podcast. So do that if you want for this. I appreciate it. It'd be awesome for the podcast. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I found out when recording these that I always find it awkward trying to end these podcasts. So I thought, well, how can I make it more awkward? How about if I end every podcast on a joke? So this is the first joke of the first podcast episode to end the show. What did the drummer name her 2 twin daughters? Anna 1, Anna 2. Screenwriters Talk Screenwriting. It's sponsored by me. If you're looking to learn more about screenwriting, check out my website at www.jordanimiola.com.